Good evening, and welcome to your front row seat on the stories shaping our world today, November 4th, 2025. It's Election Day in key U.S. states, a budget bombshell dropping in Ottawa, and trade tensions between neighbors that could spike your grocery bill overnight. I'm here to unpack it all with the unvarnished facts, because in this fast-moving landscape, knowledge is your best defense against the spin. Let's jump in, kicking off with the Democratic drama unfolding right now across the border. In the United States, it's a pulse-racing off-year election day, with millions casting ballots that could redraw power maps and policy paths for years to come. Start with the marquee gubernatorial showdowns. In New Jersey, Democrat Mikey Sherrill, a four-term congresswoman and former Navy helicopter pilot, is squaring off against Republican Jack Ciattarelli, a former state assemblyman and Trump-backed contender who nearly toppled the incumbent in 2021 by just 3 points. Sherrill's campaign hammers affordable housing and education access, while Ciattarelli pushes tax cuts and crime crackdowns, debates that hit home for families wrestling with skyrocketing rents and school shootings. Over in Virginia, it's Republican Lieutenant Governor Winsome Olsears facing Democrat Abigail Spanberger, a former CIA officer and congresswoman who's rallied former President Obama to her side, warning that a GOP win could echo Trump's agenda statewide. Olsears counters with promises of economic growth and school choice, but the race's razor-thin polls reflect Virginia's swing state volatility, where suburban parents and rural workers alike are voting on everything from abortion rights to highway tolls that dictate their daily grind. But the undisputed spotlight? New York City's mayoral marathon, a brutal primary-turned-general slugfest between Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani, a progressive state assemblyman championing rent freezes and universal childcare, and Andrew Cuomo, the scandal-scarred former governor mounting a comeback on a platform of fiscal discipline and subway safety. Mamdani surged on youth turnout, vowing to tax the ultra-wealthy to fund green jobs, while Cuomo's touting his pandemic-era chops to lure back tourists and tame inflation-fueled bodega prices. This isn't just NYC drama. With over 8 million residents, the winner could sway national Democratic fault lines on inequality and policing. Meanwhile, Pennsylvania's retention votes for 3 Democratic Supreme Court justices, Christine Donahue, David Wecht, and Kevin Doherty, carry seismic weight. A no-sweep could deadlock the court at 2-2, stalling rulings on gerrymandering, fracking permits, and voting access that ripple to swing state battlegrounds. Governor Josh Shapiro's even cut ads begging retention, underscoring how these yes/no tallies could lock in progressive majorities through 2028 or hand conservatives a veto on climate regs and union rights. And those ballot measures? They're the sleeper hits with everyday stakes. California's Proposition 50 would let Democrats scrap an independent commission's congressional maps for new ones, potentially flipping 5 GOP House seats. Think redrawn districts that could shield or sink billions in federal aid for wildfires and homelessness. Colorado's lineup tackles ranked choice voting reforms and psilocybin legalization expansions, promising shorter lines at polls or therapy breakthroughs for veterans battling PTSD. Texas, with a whopping 17 propositions, zeroes in on parental rights in schools, allowing opt-outs from sex ed or book bans, and a citizenship voting amendment to tighten elections, alongside bonds for water infrastructure amid droughts that could save ranchers' livelihoods or flood urban taps. Record early voting in NYC, topping 1.5 million ballots, mirrors nationwide surges, with over 60% turnout projected in battlegrounds. For you and me, these aren't footnotes, they're about classrooms with enough teachers, breaths of cleaner air from green mandates, or ballots that feel fairer. As polls close and recounts loom, remember, these local levers crank the national machine, from Capitol Hill gridlock to your next property tax hike. Yet, even as voters speak, a grimmer federal fiasco threatens to silence essential services. The Trump administration's showdown with GOP lawmakers over funding, now barreling toward what could be the longest shutdown in history at 35 days and counting. The impasse? A chasm over continuing resolutions. Trump and fiscal hawks like House Freedom Caucus firebrands demand a clean extension to January, slashing $5 billion in foreign aid and Obamacare subsidies to drain the swamp, while Democrats and moderate Republicans push a shorter November bridge to negotiate disaster relief and veterans care. The White House's Office of Management and Budget has agencies drafting mass firing plans, from IRS auditors to FDA inspectors, risking delays in everything from tax refunds to drug approvals. SNAP benefits? Federal judges in Massachusetts and Rhode Island just forced the USDA to dip into $10 billion in contingency funds for partial November payouts, but Trump vows appeals, warning of legal clarity that could slash food aid for 42 million low-income families. Picture empty pantries in rural Ohio or urban Philly come Thanksgiving. Air traffic control towers? Furloughs could snarl holiday flights, stranding 1.7 million daily passengers. National parks from Yellowstone to the Smokies? Barricaded, costing $76 million daily in lost tourism bucks that fund local diners and guides. Polls show 45% of Americans pinning blame squarely on Trump and the GOP, up from 30% at kickoff, with Speaker Mike Johnson pleading desperation to end the puppet-mastered stalemate. Yet Trump's latest gambit? Nuking the Senate filibuster to ram through cuts, a trump card that Senate Minority Leader John Thune calls a future Democratic nightmare. For working stiffs, this isn't theater, it's paychecks paused for 800,000 feds, small business loans iced, and Social Security backlogs that hit grandma's meds. With Election Day overlap, a Democratic sweep in NJ or VA might jolt talks loose, but as Trump tweets from Mar-a-Lago galas, the clock's ticking. Will Congress blink, or will we all pay the tab? Heading north, where the vibe's more blueprint than brawl, Canada's federal government drops Budget 2025 today, a generational pivot under Prime Minister Mark Carney that's equal parts scalpel and sledgehammer. Tabled by Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne, it's the Liberals' first fiscal swing since Carney's April election, clocking a projected $70 to $100 billion deficit for 2025 to 26, the fattest in decades outside recessions, yet framed as spend less to invest more via a shiny new capital budgeting framework splitting ops from infrastructure. The headline? Catalyzing $500 billion in total investments over 5 years, blending public dollars with private leverage at a 3.5 to 1 ratio. Targeting clean energy superpowers like high-speed rail from Toronto to Montreal and ports upgraded for Asian exports. Defense gets a massive scale-up to meet NATO pledges, potentially $20 billion annually by 2030, fortifying Arctic bases against Russian subs while creating 50,000 high-wage jobs in Quebec shipyards. Housing? $40 billion in bonds for 1 million new units, slashing GST on first-time buys and fast-tracking modular builds to tame Vancouver rents that devour 40% of young earners' pay. Then there's the trade diversification strategy, doubling non-US exports to 50% by 2030 through a major projects office greenlighting $300 billion in LNG pipelines and AI hubs, plus a 20% tax credit for SMEs adopting quantum tech or biotech, lifelines for autoworkers in Windsor pivoting from tariff-hit EVs. Worker upskilling shines too, expanding the union training program with $1.5 billion for 100,000 apprentices in Red Seal trades, and permanent $216 million yearly for the National School Food Program feeding 400,000 kids amid grocery inflation. Former budget officers like Kevin Page are cheering the boldness but waving red flags on scrutiny, demanding epic oversight for these hinge moment bets, lest audits echo past overruns on Trans Mountain. For the everyday Canuck, this blueprint means smoother via rail rides home for holidays via renewed Canada Strong passes, 25% off for under 25s, automatic tax filing saving low-income folks $500 yearly, or retraining that turns Windsor layoffs into Calgary clean tech gigs. Carney's pitching it as sovereignty insurance against U.S. protectionism, but with sacrifices like operational trims and waste cuts, it's a high-wire act, boom for builders, or bust if growth lags. As Parliament debates, this isn't just numbers, it's the roads you drive, the homes you hunt, and the jobs that keep winters warm. And no thread ties these tales tighter than the US-Canada trade tango of thorns, where a single ad just torched talks and tariffs threatened to torch wallets. Ottawa's clawed back $3 billion Canadian dollars in counter-duties on US goods like whiskey and yogurt since Trump's spring salvo, 25% hikes on Canadian steel, aluminum, autos, and lumber that ballooned to 35% by August, but mostly rescinded them for USMCA-exempt items to avoid escalation. Enter Ontario Premier Doug Ford's cheeky TV blitz, a 60-second spot airing in D.C. in World Series slots, splicing unedited Reagan 87 audio decrying barriers as hurting every American worker to spotlight job-killing tariffs on Ontario's $100 billion U.S. exports. The hook? Time for the Supreme Court's November 5 oral arguments on Trump's reciprocal tariffs legality, challenges claiming he overreached emergency powers, potentially forcing $50 billion in refunds if struck down. Trump's Thursday Truth Social fusillade? Canada cheated and got caught, fraudulently twisting Reagan, a GOP saint who loved tariffs for national security. He accused meddling in SCOTUS, slammed the door on all trade negotiations, and even drew fire from the Reagan Foundation probing selective edits. Ford blinked first, yanking the ad Monday post-Carney call to resume talks, but not before it blanketed Republican districts. Carney, fresh off an Oval Office hugfest with Trump, calls it disappointing but insists Canada's ready when the U.S. is, eyeing USMCA reviews amid 75% export reliance southward. The stakes? Daily $2.7 billion USD cross-border flow at risk, think 20% jumps on Ford F-150s in Michigan lots or maple syrup at $10 a jug in Boston. Small-town exporters from Buffalo to Brantford face bankruptcies, while truckers idle at Windsor-Detroit bridges. A SCOTUS thumbs down could refund billions but spark retaliation, a win entrenches Trump's wall. Diplomats whisper of back channels, but as Ford quips, Trump's not too happy, this chill could freeze jobs, inflate EVs, and sour that Niagara honeymoon. Urgent? Absolutely, your next fill-up depends on it. Man, what a mosaic of momentum and mayhem, from ballot boxes buzzing with Spanberger's fire to Carney's Capitol crusade, shutdown shadows to tariff tempests, stories that don't just scroll, they steer our shared tomorrow. So, hit pause and tell me, is it the NYC mayor melee gripping you, Budget 2025's bold bets, or that Reagan-fueled trade flare-up that's got your blood up? Spill in the comments, like if this lit a spark, and subscribe for tomorrow's unfiltered update. Stay sharp, stay vocal, good night.